Hey everybody, and welcome to the Hirewell YouTube channel. We're so glad that you're here. To stay up to date with all of the things that we're doing and sharing, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe below. Hirewell Talent Insights is pleased to present Hirewell Data Insights, Remote Work Trends. So Matt, we're coming up on almost a full year of experiencing COVID and working remotely. And when we think back on last March, which feels like forever ago, but also not, that was a pretty crazy month where things really started to kick off with COVID basically spreading across the globe. And it was kind of the first time in, I don't know how many years, that the entire world was kind of experiencing the same thing at the same time. And I think it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that from a professional standpoint, everybody that could work virtually was going to have to somehow convert to a virtual work environment basically overnight. So I remember we received like a text on Wednesday evening here at Hirewell saying, hey, everybody work from home. We're going to just kind of take it week by week and figure out what's going on. And I think for a lot of folks here at Hirewell, that was pretty exciting since we were very much an in-office type of environment prior to COVID. And we, I think, luckily were able to transition pretty easily and seamlessly to working remotely, essentially overnight. And it seemed like we were able to kind of integrate into that new environment pretty quickly. What were your thoughts on essentially having your entire workforce remote, knowing that for many years you wanted us in the office?
Well, yeah, so there's a few points I'd like to address. I mean, first off, it's crazy that it's been almost a year. I think back to like a year ago, we had some pretty ambitious plans for what Hirewell was looking to do in 2020. And one of those was to allow for more work from home for our employees. As you said, I was a little bit reluctant. I've been doing this too long, and I do feel, or I felt that our team was most productive in a heavily in-office environment. So I will be honest, like I still vividly remember whatever day that was, March 12th or whatever that was, watching ESPN and seeing the Jazz game get, canceled on the spot because, Rudy Gobert just tested positive for COVID. And then you see on the news, Tom Hanks tested positive. And I'm like, all right, I guess we have to start working from home. I was still naive enough to think that it was going to be a 2 or 3 week thing. So the gravity of it hadn't really, hit yet. It's just something that kind of transpired over the course of a few months. So, the work from home, honestly, for me became secondary. I mean, I think for us, it was more about how do we survive and ultimately grow and pivot as an organization, right? I mean, when you're a recruiting firm, the first thing I kind of think about is our clients can actually hire and are they going to need us? And, for a month or two, that was a little bit touch and go. It was a little bit of a scary time. And it was more about, less of a worry about where people are working, but more about kind of how are we going to just, we're going to make it through this. As time progressed and it was clear that this was not going to be just a 2 or 4 week, kind of blip, it was going to be a much longer endeavor. We've adapted as an organization. It was impressive how well our team, shifted towards that. I think what helped is as time went on, we got a lot busier. And I think that's more of the issue that I always have is that if you're busy, of course you can work from anywhere. That's the mindset that we've always had. But if you're able to produce and you're able to kind of do and hit the numbers and expectations we have, great, do it from anywhere. And this just kind of really hammered home that point. But yeah, I think as the market, improved, like kind of the question really became, what are other companies doing? Like we're at an interesting, spot in the world where we talk to hundreds of different companies at any given time about what their hiring plans are, what they're looking to do. And, we've always seen that trend of companies asking us, well, what are your clients doing? What are different organizations doing to address this? And, we wanted to make it less of an anecdotal, well, yeah, we're seeing companies let people work from anywhere, or they're starting to go remote, or they're canceling their leases and they're going 100% remote. We wanted to try to, inject more real data into this. And so that's kind of what we set on to do back in, probably late October, early November. Because we worked with Holistic to develop a survey to collect some information. And, obviously that's what I'm excited to talk to you about, the trends we're seeing, where we see things going. And, we're really looking at things sort of from 2 lenses, both remote work and then work from home, which, obviously there's a lot of overlap on those 2 things, but I consider remote work being, you really have no plans. Like the company may not have an office, or the vast majority of their employees are never going to be in that office. So those are places I consider remote first. Then there's companies that just have, much more lax work from home policies. And I would put Hirewell in that second bucket where, again, pretty much all of our employees are still in one of our major, markets. And then, the expectation is that they'll, at some point they'll come back to the office. Sometimes we don't know kind of what or how, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So again, it's looking at those two lenses: remote work versus work from home, and then what were companies doing pre-COVID, what are they doing now, and then what is their plan, if and when things, get back to more normal.
Yeah. So at the end of last year, like you said, we started to push out this survey to our various clients and different companies. And I think at this point, we've surveyed almost 70 different organizations across a number of different industries as well. So based on this survey, what were companies doing pre-COVID with regards to that remote work piece and the work from home policies?
Yeah, it was interesting numbers. I mean, so, our client base skews pretty heavily tech. So it tends to be companies where, the vast majority of their employees are software engineers or salespeople. And again, roles where you can kind of do anywhere. The numbers were interesting. So, what we saw from the remote work perspective pre-COVID, roughly 15% of the companies were what we consider remote first. So either people are 100% remote or, greater than, 50% were remote. So roughly 15% were, remote first before. What we saw were, like the work from home, like 20% had no work from home policies, or like I should say no work from home policies. It did not allow employees to work from home. 66% had occasional work from home. I guess sort of what I expected, where sort of what it felt like, like there may be allowances for work from home, but not heavily. Again, much more on site was kind of where things were back then. And you would know of companies that had remote policies or heavy remote workforces, but they were kind of few and far between.
Sure. So how did COVID then impact the remote work across different companies? And I guess to get even more like granular with that, how much did company size or even industry kind of impact or change those numbers?
Yeah, and I think that was sort of, so that's what we consider the period now, right? Where I've seen those first couple of months, just about everybody was work from home. But then I think, coming around like June or so of 2020 is where offices started to open back up. But again, where it went from, 15% being, remote first or heavily remote is now 84% of companies that we surveyed are, all remote or heavily remote. And I'll throw Hirewell into that bucket. I am, shooting today's video in our Hirewell office. I thought it'd be, I try to come down one day a week. I'm, one of two people here today. So, I thought it'd be a little ironic to do a work from home, video shoot from our office. But yeah, so again, roughly 84%. And again, obviously having it be such a heavily skewed tech, workforce that that we pulled, I think that's kind of the numbers I expected. Where we saw some numbers that they weren't was some companies were in the manufacturing space or financial services were two areas that we saw like a little bit more insistence on people being on site.
Got it. So hopefully at some point there will be a post-COVID work environment. Fingers crossed that sometime soon, not that vaccines are starting to come out. So post-COVID, what do you think work from home is going to look like? Or like, are companies planning on returning to the office, or will there be more long-term flexibility for folks?
Yeah, and that was ultimately this was the crux of what we're trying to measure for companies, right? We're curious kind of what the expectations were right now, but it's more of all right, what's the plan next? And the question we're getting from a lot of companies is, do we go 100% remote? You see a lot of stories in the cranes or in the newspaper of companies abandoning their office space and trying to sublease it and just not having an office space. And so again, there was nothing real tangible from that. So we wanted to try to pull in some more hard facts. And it was interesting. So as I said, 15% of companies pre-COVID were, remote first or all remote. That number jumped to 35%. So it was a, roughly 250, % increase in companies that are going heavily remote. That's a big number. So, again, you're talking 1 out of 3 are going that route. The other piece is, so there's a huge trend in again, heavily remote, but then the second one is kind of the blended model. And, kind of what I think Hirewell will end up doing is, kind of that work from home as you see necessary. We're going to keep our office space. No, we're not going to double our lease size by any means, but we don't want to abandon the culture. We want to allow kind of that central point where people can collaborate and work together. But it's taking a bit of a common sense approach, and so the numbers we saw is that 66% of companies allowed occasional work from home pre-COVID. That number actually dropped to, I think it was like 58%, but it dropped because of how much people are swinging in the other direction. So again, 35% are saying 100% remote or close to it. And the other key drop, as I mentioned, so 20% of companies allowed no work from home before this. That number is dropping to 7%. So that's again 70% or 65% decrease in companies that are saying no, you can't work from home ever. And I think that's kind of the trends we're seeing. So there'll be some interesting questions that still need to be answered. Unfortunately, obviously, the other piece we hold companies on is sort of why, how are they making decisions, and also are they making policies that are standard across the organization. And the one trend we saw is that most companies are not going to the one size fits all, like everybody's remote. I think it was like roughly 65% of companies want to have kind of policies vary based on either job function, seniority, where people live, things like that. So they're really taking a case by case approach to solving that. And I think that's kind of how it's going to go. And that's how it's going to go for frankly the next 6 months. I mean, I think we, as Hirewell, opened our office up back in June, but I think there's maybe then 6 people that have come here at any, regular occurrence. Hopefully in the summer, like that'll start to pick up a little bit, but we're going to have to really dig into what people want to do because, we'll have to make some business decisions of what we do for our office space and how we manage it. I look at kind of what our monthly rent, rent payment is, and it's kind of nuts that we're paying that much for 2 people to work in the office.
I have not been back in the office yet. Luckily, I had somebody drop off my laptop way back when because I did not take it home that Wednesday before everything happened, but eventually we'll get back in there and it'll be good. So I guess, Matt, my final question for you is, you're in a really unique position where you've actually led a company that was primarily in the office pre-COVID and then, found a way for your organization to still be successful in this completely virtual world. What kind of thoughts would you share with other leaders that are maybe still skeptical about virtual environments or allowing for remote flexibility post-COVID if, their business can sustainably kind of support that type of environment?
It's a good question. I think there's a few factors you have to kind of take a common sense approach. I mean, for me, it was always the fear of, well, what are people going to be doing? Are they going to be as productive? And obviously, like the transformation that it happened, just so quickly, like that fear was taken away because there's nothing we could do about it. And so you're forced into it. So you have to look at that. Like, is your business truly impacted or is it just your way of thinking? I think the second part that is important is, attracting talent, right? I mean, we're a recruiting firm. And so, if you have a policy or you have sort of a set of beliefs that doesn't match the market, you are artificially shrinking the talent pool. And, whether we apply to Hirewell or our clients, like, why would you go into a fight for top talent and make yourself significantly less attractive to the people you want to hire? And, you look at I think what made a lot of this easier is some of the big tech players like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, so quickly went to heavily remote that it dictates everybody else because you're fighting for the same talent. Like those companies are trying to hire your best people. And so they've got a better brand name. Their stock was worth more than your organization. It's already hard enough to compete with them. If they're going to then, pay your people well and let them work anywhere, you don't stand a chance. So you have to take that sort of approach. And then just, again, it's that common sense approach.
I don't have any other questions, but anything else that you want to add in?
No, I think that sums it up. The survey is still open. Our plan is, we'd love to double the respondents and get up to 150 people and then just continually utilize this data to help leaders, heads of HR and business leaders drive these sorts of decisions. And again, everybody wants to sort of compare what other people are doing. So it's continuing to be a big focus for us at Hirewell and our partner company Holistic to gather this information. So if you're interested in seeing the data yourself, we'll share the link to submit your information. You'll be able to download the results of what our survey found, and we'd love to talk to you about both the numbers we're seeing, the trends we have, as well as how we can help you find that great talent.
Awesome, love it. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome, thanks, Ryan. Talk to you later.
Okay, have a good one.